Hi students, it's Professor Wood coming to you, and I'm coming to you with a pretty difficult poem this week. I'm coming to you with The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. This particular poem was published in 1921. William Butler Yeats was an Irish poet, and he lived from 1865 to 1939. A couple of things, as I've stated previously, and always state to you. You always need to read a poem a couple of times before you get the meaning of it. And this particular poem is very, very difficult. This poem does not have a standard rhyme scheme. It's in two stanzas. So you have a lot of things going on in this particular poem, and it is extremely difficult to try and make meaning. In fact, a lot of scholars through the years have been trying to make meaning of this poem after reading it and analyzing it and annotating it and reading it again and writing papers on it and doing scholarship on it for years. No one could really come to an agreement about what the poem is actually about. This is where the context comes in and having information about the author. So I'm going to put here, of course, William Butler Yeats. I'm going to put the years 1865 to 1939 here. And then up here, I'm going to put published in 1921. So it's extremely important to have some of that context information. And of course, William Butler Yeats was an Irish poet. So the context, of course, the title of this poem is Second Coming. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read the poem to you, just so that you have a little bit of an idea of what the poem is about, and then go from there as we break it down. So, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving with slow thighs, while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? So again, there's a lot in this poem. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to really look at. There's a lot to look at in depth. First things first, it's extremely important, like I said, to know a little bit about the author. William Butler Yeats was an Irish poet, as I've stated previously. However, the fact that it was published in 1921 is extremely important because when William Butler Yeats wrote this poem, he is considered a romantic poet. And because Yeats is in that genre, that is the romantic time in literary history, um, it's very out of character for him to write something because usually during that time period, all of the poetry for the romantic writers are what I have referred to and you have heard me refer to as fluffy bunny poetry many, many times over. And so in this case, you definitely have very non-fluffy bunny poetry. It's not uplifting. It's not happy. There's a lot of negative imagery here. So the first thing I want to do is put a box around some words here. So I'm going to put a box around the word gyre, and then I'm going to put a box around Spiritus Mundi or Mundi, and then I'm going to put a box around. I'm just looking to see if there's any more words per se here that aren't, and you notice some of the spelling is different. It's because it's British spelling. But I think those are about the only major words that really will need some sort of explanation on them. So a gyre, and I'm going to go down here to the bottom of my paper just because. Think of a gyre like a cyclone. Um, and and I'm really, really a bad artist, so please forgive me. Um, but think of a gyre like a cyclone, and it is like a twirling, whirling, 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 like almost like a tornado. And so I'm just going to put gyre right here. Um, it is a spiral that expands outwards. So it starts here at the bottom and then gets bigger and 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 bigger, 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 bigger and bigger, bigger. So spiral that expands outward. Okay. So, just so that you have a better idea of what a gyre is. Now, in this first sentence, we have here turning and turning in the widening gyre. So, if you are familiar at all with poetic terminology, um, it's it's actually kind of cool. Oh, I forgot to number my lines, so I'm going to do that really quick. Okay, so 22 lines. The 22 lines packs a very powerful punch, has a whole lot of meaning in it. It's a very complex poem. So we've uncovered what the word gyre means. It's a spiral that expands outward. But we have here, we have the turning and turning. Now, again, as I stated in my previous videos, we have repetition. And typically, when you have that sort of a repetition from the author, it's intentional. And of course, he's talking about a gyre, which turns and turns and turns like a cyclone. But this is also known as assonance here, and that is the repetition of the I sound. Now, if you don't know your poetry terms, the definition of poetry, or the definition of assonance, is actually the repetition of the sound of a vowel in non-rhyming syllables. And so, or stress syllables, so the echo is discernible. So, and I think that's very important because it is a sound device, and he's utilizing that turning and turning in the widening of the gyre. So again, turning, widening, very, very important. The ing. So I'm going to highlight the widening as well. And then I'm going to give you the formal definition of assonance in poetry over here on the side, just so that you know in case you don't know. Assonance is the repetition of the sound of a vowel in non-rhyming stressed syllables. And I'm going to put like and echo. Just so that you have that sort of definition. Now, again, we have the falconer, or the falcon cannot hear the falconer. So a little bit of context here um, in the time in which this was written. Of course, it's falcons and falconers were not overly common, but in the medieval times, the falcons were kept by falconers. Now, of course, we do have people that specialize in working with falcons today. They are bird specialists. However, here, in this case, and in the time in which this was written, Yeats definitely intended this as a metaphor. So I'm just going to put it here as a metaphor. Gosh, I can't spell today. Now, this semicolon is extremely important. You have a semicolon here, and a semicolon here, and a semicolon here. So these semicolons are intentional on the part of the author. This is actually a caesura, which is an interruption in the sentence. So I'm going to put here over here on the side. An interruption of these sentences or thoughts. Recess. Okay. So just so you have it, it's and my handwriting is awful. Caesura. So that Caesura. Okay. Things fall apart. Oh look, there's another one. The center cannot hold. So you have two caesuras in that sentence. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Again, you have like the use of the word mere and the word loose. Very important. Mere anarchy, like it's not important. Going to highlight the next sentence, thing fall apart, the center cannot hold. He's referring to the center here. Remember our little gyre down here. So say this is Earth down here. Well, the center is here. And so drawing that line from there to there, saying the center cannot hold. This is actually a paradox. And it's making reference to the next line, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. So he's saying that civilization is disintegrating. Okay. So civilization is disintegrating. And again, mere here in the way that he's using it, mere anarchy. Of course, that's craziness, rebellion, loosed upon the world. You know, he is definitely saying here that civilization is disintegrating. And then he's got the blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned, which leads to another caesura. So I'm going to use red. Actually, I need my pink highlighter because it's closest to the color red. So what do you think here? The blood-dimmed tide. Very, very important. That ending sound, the sounds there, obviously is critically important. That's alliteration. So I'm just going to draw a little here and then alliteration of the sound. Okay. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. Okay. Again, seriously major imagery. He's saying the ceremony of innocence. What does he mean by that? Well, he's talking about society in general. Remember, he said civilization was disintegrating. And he's saying there are no innocent people anywhere. And the next line answers that, really. We got the caesura there. The best. Okay, so his word choice here is important. The best people, the good people who lack all conviction, okay, Now, I don't know why he didn't put a semicolon here because, again, this is actually known as enjambment, stopping a sentence mid-thought and then continuing it on the next sentence. While the worst, okay, so again, you have that sort of paradoxical statement, so I'm going to get the purple highlighter. While the worst are full of passionate intensity. So to break down these two lines, okay, so the best people, change colors, our best people your best people, your good people, they're despondent. They are unconsolable. Okay. While the worst, they love the terror and chaos. They thrive on it. Okay. And again, I'm just kind of breaking it down. These two lines here are juxtaposition. So a contrast. These two lines are a juxtaposition and a contrast because you have the best that lack all conviction, and then you have the worst. So you have the best and the worst in the same sentence. And the best, they're despondent. They can't do anything. They really, are hopeless and helpless. And the worst are thriving. They love the chaos. They love the terror. They love all of that. Now, with that being said, and of course, um, you have the first stanza, the entire first stanza has some really, really dark imagery in it. Make sure that I document that that is a paradox. And the entire first stanza really does have a lot of sad and dark imagery, and keeping that in mind, knowing that this was published in 1921, gives you a little bit of when Yeats wrote this poem, the world was falling apart around him. This poem was written in post World War I Europe. World War I was ultimate chaos, and so having that information is extremely important in the interpretation of the poem. He's saying civilization is disintegrating, civilization is falling apart, things are falling apart, and he uses this gyre, this image, the gyre and the falcon and the falconer, as sort of a way for his audience to be able to see that. And so we have a lot of that going on. Now, notice your stanzas are not equal. We have 8 lines in the first stanza, and then we have the rest of the poem, 9 through 22, here. And so that's critically important. So the second stanza is much, much longer. And typically when you are annotating poetry and you're looking at structure and you're trying to come up with an interpretation of the poem, you want to look at structure. How many lines is it? Does it have a rhyme scheme? If you can't already tell, this is written in blank verse. There is no rhyme scheme at all. And it's only 2 stanzas, so it's a very short poem. Now, it does have a lot in it. And that's just in the first 8 lines. You can get all of these things from it. Now, as we go to the second stanza, we have a little bit more. So we have surely some revelation is at hand. So I'm going to find a different color highlighter here. Let's go with green. And we have here repetition of the word surely here. But surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. Again, second coming, second coming. So those words are very important, not only because they're a repetition, but because they make they make a reference, a biblical allusion. So we have Revelation, of course, refers to the biblical last book of the Bible. So I'm going to put the word allusion here, and then another allusion. and then illusion here. You know, he thinks the world is ending. He says, hardly are those words out. Now, when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi. So this literally means spirit of the world. This is what it translates to. I look at this as an oxymoron. When a vast image, because he's saying second coming, second coming. So you have this biblical allusion here, all this violence, this terror, all these things that are talked about in the book of Revelation. And again, you have Yates's audience would have primarily been Christian, and so they would have known about the second coming or the prediction of the second coming. So having this is definitely important. So I'm just going to put violence and terror, because of course the book of Revelation was all of those things, and using the word revelation, and the word the second coming, it does refer to the second coming of Christ. Biblical allusions. Okay, we've got book of Revelation and the second coming. The second coming of Christ. And so having that information, and just in 9, 10, and 11, and 12, he's got when a vast image out of the spirit of the world, that's an oxymoron, troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert. Now, if you are familiar with poetry, you know here we've got sight and somewhere and sands. So here we have some alliteration, the repetition of this. I can't spell today, so my apologies. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body in the hand of a man. So again, I'm going to get out my green highlighter because this is another allusion. Obviously, he is making reference. Now, remember, allusions are typically biblical or historical, but we definitely have an allusion here. And this is an allusion to some sort of Sphinx-like creature. Now, whether it is indeed the Sphinx, I don't know, but it does then say, so somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. Well, my best beloved students, you know, of course, that a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is most definitely a simile. And so he's comparing the gaze to the sun. So switching colors, simile, the gaze of the creature is compared to the sun. Okay. He's also basically saying that, notice I called it a creature. He's saying it's inhuman and it's stoic. It has no expression. The gaze is blank and it's pitiless. So it is very stoic. It's not showing any emotion. The word stoic means emotion. So, this gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. And then it goes to its next line, is moving its slow thighs while all about it. And it uses the word its, or he uses the word its, which is actually pretty important. It, in reference to the creature, it is moving its slow thighs while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. Now, the word indignant, that was the other word that I was looking for. Indignant, the box around it. Indignant, and at the bottom, I'm going to put Dignant. Indignant actually means irritated. And then another word that we'll get to here in just a little bit. So, indignant desert birds. Now, again, like I said, it refers to it being a creature. So I'm just going to down here. Word choice. Real shadows of the indignant desert birds. In my mind, he is talking about vultures. Vultures often travel in a circle, and they're associated with death or decaying things. They feed off the decaying corpses. They travel in a circle. So in my mind, when he says real shadows of the indignant, so irritated desert birds, these vultures, then we have, again, some more alliteration. We have the darkness drops. Darkness drops again. But now I know, oh, look, there we go again. We have that little Bezura. So I'm going to, I missed them when I was annotating for them earlier. Draw a line here, Caesura. And remember, the caesura is an interruption of the sentences or thought process. And this is alliteration. Darkness drops, repetition of a sound, a consonant sound. So alliteration. The darkness drops again. But now I know. Okay, so we have a shift here. It shifts, a little bit of a shift. Now I know. So we shift from it's and, kind of a third person perspective. It goes from third POV to first POV. So it goes from third person point of view, so an outside observer, to first person and says, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep. Okay, 20 centuries. So he's talking about, of course, 1921 would be the 20th century. So 20 centuries since the Christ was born, or current events. Were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. So his word choice here, vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, that imagery, sort of, the word vexed means annoyed. So they were annoyed to a nightmare by a rocking cradle. This rocking cradle, of course, and if you were following along as I was talking earlier, that the rocking cradle here, and we mentioned, of course, that this was after World War I, and he's got all these biblical allusions, Second Coming, Revelation. Rocking cradle could be a reference to Jesus Christ, especially with the 20 centuries of stony sleep. And of course, we have that alliteration here, stony sleep, alliteration. Okay. Vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. So I'm just going to write, Jesus, perhaps, just to have that there as a question as I'm going through. And then the last two lines, it shifts. And what rough beast? Uh-oh, here we go. We have the word beast. Very, very important. The usage of the word beast in this particular poem specifically. The use of the word beast is critically important because, of course, rough beast could be a symbol, but in my opinion here, when he says beast, he is referring, of course, to the Antichrist. And again, remember we have the rocking cradle, Antichrist. Okay. And then we've got these last two lines, and he uses this verb here, this really major verb. His verb is slouches. Slouches towards, oh, look, wait for it, Bethlehem, to be born. And then it ends with a question. So, it's our come round at last. Here in the last two lines, it's been waiting. It's been waiting. It's been waiting for a long time. And that line there, it's been waiting. And then slouches towards Bethlehem, to be born. And so having that, slouches towards Bethlehem, again, that allusion, that very vivid allusion. So, I'm going to use a really, really bright yellow. Slouches towards Bethlehem. So it is a little bit of a different yellow, but it is still yellow. Slouches toward Bethlehem. I'm going to circle the word Bethlehem here, and that does kind of confer or confirm my suspicion here. The word rough beast, meaning Antichrist, and then the verb choice here, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born, that he is referring to the Antichrist. And he, of course, here was talking about Jesus. So I think the rough beast is symbolic of chaos and destruction, i.e. the rise of totalitarianism. So I really think that is what he was trying to do. And again, it's a lot to unpack when you really look at it and you see it. He is using the devices. So write down here the devices that I talked about throughout it. Imagery, very important. With dart. We have the allusions, the biblical allusions. You have symbolic symbolic language. You have the caesura that he's using. And so all of these are devices that you can focus on. Remember, when you write about poetry and you're writing about an analysis of poetry, there is no wrong answer because everyone is going to have a different interpretation. And as I've said before, and I said at the beginning of this video, no one can agree as to what this poem is exactly about. And so it's critically important that you realize your interpretation, even if you tried to interpret it on your own or annotate it on your own, it's not incorrect. But just being able to put it together and kind of walk through it. So again, I'm going to tell you to, and there's not a lot of room left on this paper, but I'm going to use the myth here, which is my standard go-to when trying to break down poems. Remember mood, imagery, structure, and theme and tone. So, when you're looking at poetry, when you're trying to determine a mood, certainly the mood of the poem is either going to be happy or it's going to be sad. So what I tell my students and have told all my students for years, is it a wahoo poem or is it a boohoo poem? And this is a boohoo poem. And the reason why I say it's a boohoo poem is because it's got all these negative words and this negative imagery. It's talking about the destruction and the fear of fate and humanity and chaos and upheaval, and the world is changing. And of course, having that context, of course, that it was published in 1921, post-World War I, which was a very horrible time in history. And then, of course, you have the rise of totalitarianism that was happening right after that. Is critically important. So having that would have inspired him. Writers write what they know, and in this case, that is basically what's going on there. So imagery, you've got, I'm going to put the Sphinx And your imagery, what you see and what I see may be completely different. I'm going to put the cradle. I'm going to put the gyre. And then the falcon. Because, again, those are all things that I saw and visualized and could see as I was reading the poem. Now, structure, I didn't write it up here, but as I told you before, it's very important to look for, there's no discernible rhyme scheme. It's blank verse. And it is 22 lines. And the T, big T. There's little t and there's big T. There's theme and there's tone. You could use the T as tension to make things easier. However, I use T for both theme and tone. And tone is the author's attitude towards it. So the author really has sort of a negative perception towards society and what is happening in society. Your theme, and again, there's multiple perceptions about it, but I would say if I had to come up with a short theme, of course we have universal themes here, but in this particular poem, you have chaos and upheaval in a changing world, and so that is critically important. So I'm just going to put chaos and upheaval in a changing world. And then tone, I'm just going to write beside it, is definitely negative and fearful. So have all that. All that is to say here, Jake had fears. He had fears about the fate of humanity. So I'm going to switch colors and I'm going to write that here somewhere. And you can use any and or all of this. If you decide to write on this particular poem. But that is really what is going on here is you have him talking about the fate of humanity, the fears. He's talking about chaos and upheaval in a changing world. And remember, this is post-World War I, and that's really important. Post-World War I Europe. And of course, he was Irish, and so therefore at the time, he was considered a European citizen. So I hope that helped you really understand a little bit about the poem. Again, I know that that's a lot of highlighting, a lot of writing, a lot of talking. Listening to me for 38 minutes is not exactly the easiest thing to do. But I really hope that it has helped you understand the poem a little bit more and really be able to make you feel a little more comfortable when it comes to annotations. Sometimes you just have to read it once or twice and really break it down. And it's all about knowing information about the author's background and having that context as well as when the poem was published, because that definitely helps as you're looking at poems. So anyway, again, like I said, I hope this helps, and let me know if you need any assistance. You know how to reach me. Thanks so much. Peace out.